Hi everyone, this is Neil from the National Youth Rights Association, and today we're here in New Orleans, Louisiana, with former State Senator Eric LaFleur. The reason why we wanted to talk to him is back in 2018, he introduced SB 429, which would have lowered the drinking age in Louisiana from 21 to 18. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for having us here today.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
So just as a little icebreaker question, we thought we'd ask, how old were you when you had your first drink?
Well, hopefully my mom is not watching, but I guess I was probably, I would say 15 or 16, somewhere around there.
So quite a bit younger than 21, and I think that's true for a lot of people that they started drinking maybe in their mid or late teens or something, yet it's illegal in all 50 states to serve alcohol to people under 21. So when did you first decide that you supported a lower drinking age and that this is something you wanted to pursue?
Well, I think I first got interested in the case. The whole issue is when the state decided that they were going to make it illegal, or raise the drinking age, and the case that the case where that law was challenged was in my district,
okay,
in the 13th Judicial District, and the court in Evangeline Parish, or in that district, declared it unconstitutional, and said that the state law that was passed at that time, which raised the drinking age, was unconstitutional for a variety of different reasons. But my interest was always I always had an interest in the issue, but that's when it really became center stage for everybody in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And for all over the United States. I think we were the last, or maybe the second to last state.
I think the last, yeah.
To raise the drinking age to 21. So.
Okay. And I guess the reason that all states have raised their drinking age to 21 is the federal government is taking tax money from everyone and saying to the states, we'll give it back to you in the form of highway funding if you set the drinking age the way we want you to, which is 21. So when you introduced SB 429, what was your sort of legal strategy for how we'd be able to lower the drinking age in Louisiana? How did you envision this maybe playing out?
Well, therein lies the problem that Congress can pass a law by using our own taxpayer dollars for highway construction and somehow impose upon the state what is typically left to the state.
Yeah.
And at least in my opinion, that's an issue that is the Constitution allows for the states to make those decisions about at what age you could drink, that basic civil right. And the states can grant greater civil rights than the federal Constitution.
Yeah.
And so to the extent that our Constitution does that, and arguably it does, to me, that statute would be contrary to what the basic underlying writing of the Constitution, which says those things not reserved or left up to the states.
Right.
And so in this case, they circumvent that underlying principle by using our own money to force upon us, to force upon us something that we may not agree with. But when we look at the practicality of it, a state particularly like Louisiana would not want to have all of their taxpayer dollars leaving and not coming back. So
right.
We almost all succumb to those types of mechanisms by which Congress can do what they did here.
So your hope was that if this bill was passed in Louisiana, it would sort of provoke a Supreme Court fight and challenge the idea that this is something for the federal government to decide, and that it would result in a decision saying that this law is contrary to the Constitution and that these issues should be left up to the states.
Well, I don't know if I didn't propose it to really set the stage for a lawsuit necessarily. I proposed the law because, from a practical standpoint, because in Louisiana you can drink when you're less than 21, essentially if you're with your parents.
Okay.
So if you go to a restaurant, and if there's, and I think there's no prohibition against this, but if you go to a restaurant and the restaurant has no opposition to it, and you're with your parents, you're allowed to drink. and I think that's how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And this bill was nothing more than an extension of what I think is a parent's right,
Mm-hmm.
which is to make those kinds of decisions. So in this
Mhm.
case, what would have happened is if you're going off to college or, I don't know, you leave the house or whatever, working somewhere, this would have allowed you to be able to drink under the age of 21 with a certain designation on your driver's license is what
Okay.
it amounts to. And so, and there were other conditions associated with that. You would have to go through an annual, I forgot all the details, but you'd have to go through an annual training, if you will, or maybe a reminder class of the implications of drinking, because I mean, there are negative aspects to it for sure, there's no doubt about it. And we see that today, even with a 21-year-old drinking law. So I don't know if it's really having much impact, but anyway, this would have extended that right to a parent through this process by which these classes would have been taken, and a parent could have authorized their under 21-year-old son or daughter to be able to drink when they chose to, with a whole bunch of other conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's essentially what it would have done. And I think the real reason we decided to bring the bill is because there was a series of stories in the newspaper about all this binge drinking.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if the law currently has the kind of positive public policy that you want to have.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't encourage responsible drinking. If anything, it might discourage it and encourage people to drink, not socially, but people to drink at home or, out somewhere where they can hide, and the same way that you do it with illicit drugs.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's really a good policy. And so when we saw the binge drinking, I just thought, well, in Canada and all these, they're not that far from us.
Right.
Why can't our 18-year-olds be responsible and like they do everywhere else in the world? And so this was a way to kind of get that in motion, and that you had parental consent, you had some training built in, it was a privilege, an extraordinary privilege that your parents could give you,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you met all these other conditions. And so I think it would have gotten out of committee. I don't know if it would have passed the whole floor, but people talked about it a good bit, and I had way more positive than I had negative.
That's good to hear. And the way you set it up, where
From parents particularly.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Okay. The way it's set up in your bill with parents allowing this once you're 18, is that the way you'd support it ideally? Because like in other countries, it's just like a lower drinking age than 21 without any sort of parental consent or training, and there are other civil rights that you get at 18 without any sort of parental consent or training.
Right.
So did you introduce it this way because that's how you preferred it would be, or just as sort of the first step in order to start the ball rolling, given the current law in Louisiana where you can drink with your parents?
I think it was to just drive home how ridiculous it might be that
Mm-hmm.
you can be 19 or 20, you
Yeah.
can be drafted, you can be killed on behalf of the fight of your country, you can get married, you can serve alcohol, you can own a bar,
Okay.
you can get married, you can incorporate, you can certainly commit a felony at 18, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but you can't have a beer at your wedding.
Yeah.
You can't even drink champagne at your wedding.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's what you wanted to do, but it just seems like all of that just didn't seem to make much sense. And so I thought this was a practical and realistic way to allow adults to act like adults. Now, I mean, if you live at home, you really don't do too much without your parents' consent
Right.
for the most part. But here, it provided for that. So
Mhm.
it kind of kept all those pieces together, and I thought this was a practical approach to do it because it gave parents the authority that they currently have, really, but allowed that authority to extend beyond the home.
Got it.
And so that was the reason. There was a lot of thought that went into it, but that was the underlying reason why we did it the way we did it.
Okay. So how did it go when you introduced this bill? What was the reaction from other lawmakers, and how far did it get, and what do you think stopped it from going further, and what would you sort of recommend for someone who tries to do this in the future?
Well, I think that I think that really the sentiment was that, yeah, this makes sense, and many people were in favor of it, but they certainly didn't. They certainly didn't want to be on the hook as having voted for something like this. They could have denied the state millions and millions of dollars of highway money. And so that was a big reason. The other reason is Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And I even met with some of the mothers, and these are people that lost loved ones. I mean, lost an 18-year-old, lost a 20-year-old, whatever the case might be. And there's no sadder story than to have that happen. But at the same time, state police testified against the bill. The highway department testified against the bill. I think the governor's office testified against the bill. And part of their reasoning was that we were going to lose this money. The other reasoning was the way the policy's written, they feel like it's a good policy and it protects people. I don't know if it really protects the 18-year-old, 19-year-old, because in those cases, those are truly irresponsible drinkers.
Yeah.
And the current law doesn't make them more responsible. It just makes them hide out so they can arguably be less responsible and hide from the social norms of I don't want to say positive drinking, but I mean of
drinking in moderation.
Drinking in moderation and drinking in the way you should. And so it doesn't promote good. It doesn't promote good moderate drinking. It promotes the kinds of things that people go off somewhere, they drink, they get hammered, they drive home, and they have an accident. They either kill themselves or they kill someone else. Yeah. So in this particular case, at least you have the way this permission would have been granted is that there's an annual reminder to that person about the privilege that you have and the responsibilities associated with it. And you can have both. You can drink in moderation and you can enjoy wine or whatever you want, and you can do it safely. And that's even more so true today than it probably was in the past because of Uber and Lyft and all these other services that are out there. So if there's ever been a time where you could do it, it would be now.
Okay. Well, it is often difficult to change these things. Like once a right is taken away, like the drinking age goes up or the smoking age goes up, it's really difficult to sort of roll it back. But we appreciate your effort to do this, and I think it's the right thing to have a lower drinking age, and that one day hopefully it'll happen across the United States.
Yeah, and the bill wasn't brought so that we could have a free for all where high school seniors that are 18 can start partying and drinking and carrying on. It's just a recognition of somebody's age. And what all the other laws are that surround or the other rights that these people have at that age group. And then you have this one that just sits out there and you kind of wonder, how can you not have a beer and be obligated to fight for your country or do all the other things that you have to do?
Yeah.
So, the education factor was in there, and I think that resonated as a positive aspect of the bill.
Yeah, there's no required education right now, and people don't necessarily learn how to drink responsibly.
No, there's nothing.
Yeah.
In fact, if you make it illegal as it is now, I think you push people either to drink not in moderation because they don't have the social consequences associated with it. They're not drinking regularly and kind of learning how to do it in moderation. And there are anecdotal stories that I have heard after we dropped this bill where bar owners were telling me that they had kids that were coming to the bar. These guys have been in this bar business for a long time, before the drinking age and after, where people were in there and they weren't drinking, but they clearly were on something. And so, and lots of high consumption of alcohol, high consumption of water and fruit juices, and he just said, those guys would be drinking beer, but they're not. They're on something else. And so when you make it illegal, whether it's one's a felony or one's a misdemeanor, I think the idea that they're both illegal, I won't get caught, and I got to go through the same steps to keep it quiet and to keep it secret. So I'll do something a little bit stronger than beer.
Okay, well, I think that's about all the questions I had. Is there anything you'd like to add about this topic of lowering the drinking age?
No, and it's more than about drinking. It's about somebody being an adult.
Yeah.
So whether, if there was a prohibition from starting your own business, or a prohibition, like for something else that you should be able to do at 18, this is just one of many, and,
Yeah.
so, I'm surprised that nationwide there aren't more people at age of 18 that aren't excited about the issue and
Yeah.
how it might affect them.
Okay, well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us
Sure.
and for your efforts on this, and, you know, we'll always certainly be interested in this, and if you end up advocating for this in some other way, we're there to help you.
Yep, we'll be around to talk about it some more.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
All right, thank you.